Are you curious to find out what happens in KonoSuba after where the anime leaves off? Do you want to be massively spoiled and find out how the series ends? Well then, you've come to the right place. Let me regale you with all the adventures of Kazuma, Megumin, Aqua, and Darkness that have yet to be animated. Also, as a quick disclaimer, this script was written while Season 3 of KonoSuba is not yet out. As such, if you're watching this sometime in the future, some parts of this video will have become less relevant. Hell, if you're in a future where the whole series has got adapted, great! You can stop watching this video right now and I'll be happy that KonoSuba has got the treatment it deserves. Anyways, let's put the future aside and dive right into the series. Right after the KonoSuba movie, Kazuma and crew return to Axel after saving the Crimson Magic Village. Back in the mansion, Kazuma, being the upstanding individual he is, starts bemoaning the lack of a little sister archetype in his party. And for those of you who are thinking, well, what about Megumin? Apparently, she can't fill that trope since she's already filling the jailbait one. In the middle of these questionable complaints, Kazuma and his party get invited to have dinner with the Princess of the Kingdom, Iris. And, of course, Kazuma's immediate thought is, great, maybe she can be my little sister. Understandably, Darkness's response is less enthusiastic because she is all too aware of her party's track record with behaving in polite society. But, alas for her, she is overruled. Our protagonists have dinner with Iris and behave about as well as would be expected, to the horror of Darkness. But, thanks to Kazuma regaling Iris with tales of their adventures, she is enraptured and kidnaps Kazuma, taking him back with her to the palace. Thus, the corruption of Princess Iris begins. While staying in the palace, Kazuma tells her inappropriate stories, plays games with her, distracts her, and even gets Iris to start calling him Big Brother, all while being a general nuisance to the rest of the castle. Sadly, all good things must come to an end, and Kazuma's companions come to pick him up. Iris throws a going-away party for Kazuma, and a couple of juicy pieces of information come to light. First, Adler, you know, the noble whose house was bombed by Kazuma, and who tried to get Darkness to marry his son? Well, that fine individual is going around trying to convince everyone that, forget his son, Darkness should really marry Prince Jadis. Strange given the lustful way he looks at Darkness. Also, and on an entirely unrelated note, Kazuma hears about a righteous thief who's going around pulling the classic Robin Hood, stealing from corrupt nobles and giving to the poor. While Kazuma has no strong opinions on wealth redistribution, he'd kind of like an excuse to be able to stay in the palace longer, and he sees this as a chance. So he decides to try and catch the thief. Now, who could be the most likely future target of a thief? Adler, obviously. So Kazuma heads there to stake out for the thief. And he finds them. Turns out it's Chris. She starts a spiel about how she has a secret mission and Kazuma needs to help her. His response is roughly, "La la la, can't hear you, don't want to be wrapped up in this. Use bind on me and escape please." Anyways, Chris pieces out, and Kazuma is set to get booted from the palace, having run out of excuses. He runs into Chris a second time, and this time we actually get to find out her motive. As established earlier, when Japanese reincarnations get sent to this world, Aqua was handing them various OP treasures. But what happens to those treasures when the users die? Well, they become a liability, especially if they fall into the wrong hands, and in this case, two are missing. One that lets the users swap bodies, and another one that can summon monsters. Chris's main goal has actually been recovering these treasures, and the wealth redistribution has just been an added bonus. Presented with the urgency of Chris's quest, Kazuma still decides to keep out of it. Then the demon army attacks the capital. Kazuma's party is useful, except Kazuma. He gets himself killed by kobolds, and Aqua reses him for the umpteenth time. Unsurprisingly, everyone in the palace is unimpressed, and Kazuma's next antics don't help things. Kazuma manages to locate the body-swapping necklace that Chris was after. Prince Jadis apparently gave it to Iris. Iris and Kazuma then have a great idea of swapping bodies for kicks. Kazuma uses this opportunity to peek on Darkness and one of Iris's attendants while bathing, and gets caught when the bodies swap back. So, at this low point, Chris shows up for round 3 of convincing Kazuma. It is revealed that the body-switching artifact will become permanent if one of the switchies dies, and that this could be used for eternal life. The whole, when you get old, steal a younger person's body deal. Anyways, Kazuma, seeing the risk to his quote-unquote little sister, finally sets out on a robbing expedition with Chris. The pair of Chris and Kazuma run rampant through the castle after giving up on stealth way too quickly, and instead opt to incapacitate all the guards with a variety of tricks, like blowing dirt in their eyes, Kazuma's luck-boosted sharpshooting, and a thief skill called Bind, which summons ropes, tying someone up. This becomes a go-to spell for Kazuma later in the series because of its convenience, and a favorite of Darkness's for its bondage play potential. Anyways, Kazuma and Chris are able to recover the body-swapping artifact in the end, and Kazuma gets an added bonus when he accidentally steals Iris's engagement ring. An interesting twist that goes absolutely nowhere. As this arc comes to a close, it is revealed that Adlerp is the culprit behind the body-swapping artifact. He gave the necklace to Prince Jadis with the plan that when the prince married Darkness, he would steal the body and thus be able to do unspeakable things to her. Now that his convoluted plan has failed though, he opts for a simpler route and just plans to marry Darkness himself. Which brings us to the Darkness wedding arc. As the Darkness wedding arc kicks off, Vanir foretells Darkness's doom. He tells her she can't do anything about it, but Kazuma might be able to help. Then, right on cue, to kick off her doom, Darkness is summoned by Adlerp. When she gets back, she's suddenly insistent that Kazuma and crew go off with her to fight the Kowloon Hydra. Kazuma isn't terribly keen, but she guilt-trips him into it, so off they go to slay the many-headed monster. Surprise, surprise, Kazuma does not survive the encounter. While he's visiting Eris before getting resurrected though, he does get an interesting tip. Apparently he's met Eris several times in the mortal realm. Now, who could she be? Anywho, after surviving their first unsuccessful outing, Megumin and Darkness continue with further Hydra slaying attempts, while Aqua and Kazuma opt to stay home, and the Hydra remains stubbornly alive. Eventually, Kazuma decides to help again and manages to convince all the adventurers in Axel to help Darkness slay the Hydra, which they do. Hooray! But then Darkness doesn't return home. The remaining members of Kazuma and Co. get a letter from Darkness telling them she has to take care of noble business and can't be part of the party anymore. They try to enter the noble's mansion where she is staying and are rebuffed. After this setback, what does Kazuma do? He gives up and decides to find a replacement for Darkness. Our hero, ladies and gentlemen. Our misfit crew briefly welcomes Dust into their band, but their adventures with him aren't terribly successful. We do get a hilarious side plot though. You see, Dust's old party member, Rin, has got a nobleman boyfriend who has been asking for naughty pictures. Dust reacts calmly and maturely when he finds out, and asks Kazuma to join him breaking into said nobleman's room. When they arrive inside, they find the offending camera, and Dust has a brilliant idea. Why not take a ton of lewd pictures of him using the camera to troll the nobleman? About halfway through their spicy photo shoot, the nobleman and Rin return to the room, and an interesting twist is revealed. It turns out, the nobleman was into Dust, not Rin, and was asking Rin for pictures of Dust. Dust has some feelings about what he's just got himself into, and Kazuma and Rin leave Dust to his fate. As they walk away, Rin mentions that Darkness will be getting married to Adler, and Kazuma's reaction is equally calm and mature as Dust's was before. So he grabs Megumin and Aqua, and they set out to break into the nobleman's mansion at night. Aqua buffs Kazuma up, and he is able to successfully sneak into Darkness's room with just a bit of acting. You see, one of the buffs Aqua gave Kazuma was the Versatile Actor buff, and he is able to use it to great effect, imitating others and tricking them. Most notably, he pretends to be Darkness using a sex toy, which convinces the guards that maybe they won't open the door he's behind. Upon reaching Darkness, she reveals that she'll be marrying Adler to pay off her father's debt, and then proceeds to try and seduce Kazuma. Things are getting steamy, right up until Kazuma makes an offhand comment about Darkness's abs, which is taken poorly, and Kazuma has to flee the mansion without Darkness. The next attempt to save Darkness is made by Megumin, who sends in a bomb, or rather an explosion threat, to try and stop the wedding. The police don't have a hard time figuring out who sent it though, so Megumin's off to jail. Then we come to the day of the wedding. Vanir reveals that the debt the Dustiness household took on was mostly to cover damages caused by Kazuma and Ko's previous escapades, flooding the town, the mobile fortress, and so on. He then offers to buy all of Kazuma's inventions to give him just enough money to pay off the debt, and we're off to the wedding. Aqua is officiating, and it is glorious. Darkness, you are here today to marry this man who appears to be the offspring of a bear and a pig, in contravention of orders from me, a goddess, and allowed yourself to be swept along by events. Do you swear to take this old fart on in sickness and in health, in happiness and sadness, for richer or poorer? Do you swear to love this old fart, respect him, comfort him and help him, and to protect your chastity with your life? You can't do it, can you? I'd sure like to just go home with you, Darkness. We could pick up Kazuma's food, toss back a drink. Following those interesting new vows being read by Aqua, Kazuma dumps money to cover the entire debt at Adler's feet, and Bride carries Darkness out of the church. Megumin and Union show up as self-titled evil wizards to help steal the bride, threatening to follow up on their earlier explosion threat, and Axel's adventurers fight Adler's guards. What does Adler do then? Well, he gets dragged off by a demon he'd been sorting with in a plot point I forgot to mention. So yeah, all's well that ends well. Also, turns out Chris is Lady Eris. Kind of obvious in retrospect. On to the next arc. After two relatively plot-heavy arcs, at least by KonoSuba standards, it's time for some fluff. The festival arc. So there's this annual festival for Eris and Axel, and Aqua decides that she wants to cancel it and have it replaced with an Aqua Festival instead. As a compromise, Kazuma manages to sell the president of the shopping district, who organizes the festival, on having a joint Axis-Eris festival, arguing that it would be a great moneymaker. They set up the festival so that the two churches are covering all the costs and competing with each other. While the festival preparations are ramping up, Chris/Eris recruits Kazuma for another heist mission. This time, they're stealing a sacred treasure in the form of armor from some random noble. The armor, Aegis, turns out to be able to walk and talk and is incredibly annoying and perverted. It screams about being kidnapped when Kazuma and Chris approach it, so they have to abandon their mission for the time being. Then, we're on to the first day of the festival. The Axis Church, being the Axis Church, tries a bunch of different scams at various festival booths they're running, and Kazuma, being Kazuma, convinces the organizers that really all the sales girls need to be wearing swimsuits because something something Aqua is the goddess of water, or something something sex appeal will increase profits. In the evening, Chris and Kazuma make their second attempt at stealing Aegis, and this time it runs away of its own accord. So, how do Chris and Kazuma eventually capture the armor? Well, in the second day of the festival, they arrange a Miss Eris beauty contest. And Aegis, being the pervert that he is, shows up. Other than that, there's a bit of a riot, the Axis Church tries to set up a pyramid scheme, and generally the festival was a great success. Moving on. It's been a while since the last time the Misfit crew defeated one of the demon generals, so you'll be happy to know the next arc is devoted to that. The dark god Wolbach has appeared on the front lines of the war between humans and demons, and is threatening to overcome humanity's greatest fortress. This is, at least in part, Megumin's fault, since Wolbach used to be sealed in the Crimson Magic Village, and at various points, both Megumin and later her little sister Komeko broke the seal containing her. Anyways, our heroes set off to save the fortress from certain destruction, and their journey goes relatively smoothly. Just a random encounter with a zombie dragon thanks to Aqua's personal undead magnetism, and a hot springs encounter where Kazuma meets some totally not suspicious lady he previously met in Arkentletia, talking to Demon General Hans. Upon arriving at the fortress, they discover Wolbach is just Megumin, with an upgraded escape strategy. She shows up once a day, casts Explosion on the fortress, and instead of getting carried away on the back of one of her friends, uses Teleport to run away. Truly an obnoxious foe if there ever was one. Kazuma and Co sneak out to try and ambush Wolbach. And what do you know, she's the same lady Kazuma met in the baths twice. Aqua and Wolbach trade barbs about fake goddesses. Aqua summons sacred water, and Wolbach teleports away. Unsatisfied with that encounter, Aqua quickly proves herself to be the greater goddess. Remember at the beginning of KonoSuba where Aqua and Kazuma were both masons? Well, as it turns out, Aqua's got a real knack for that type of work, and she manages to rebuild and even expand the fortress at a faster rate than Wolbach can destroy it. At the same time, Megumin recognizes the genius in Wolbach's strategy and copies it, sneaking up, launching explosions on the Demon Lord's army, and getting Union to teleport her away. As the Demon army is not in a fortified position, they start faring rather poorly. But before you get too excited by the battles, let's jump into some backstory. Long ago, the goddess of sloth and violence was defeated, split into two parts, and sealed in stone. One of the entities was Wolbach, who represented sloth, and the other was Chomsky, who represented violence. Recognizing the value of these stones, the Crimson Magic Village decided to take them home and use them as tourist attractions, because what could possibly go wrong? Well, 8 years before the main series, a young Megumin thought the sealing stones were a great puzzle, and while playing with them, accidentally released Wolbach and Chomsky. Chomsky became a giant black beast and tried to munch on Megumin. Wolbach used Explosion to defeat Chomsky and saved Megumin, physically, but not mentally. You see, this is where Megumin got her explosion obsession. Anyways, Wolbach then drained Chomsky, turned her into the small demon cat we know and love, and resealed her for good measure. 7 years later, Komeko, again, thinking that sealing stones were great toys, released Chomsky into the wild, and she was eventually adopted as Megumin's familiar. Aside ended, and the rest of the battle is wrapped up relatively quickly. In a confrontation between the heroes and Wolbach, Megumin casts Explosion without chanting, getting the drop on Wolbach. And thus, the apprentice is now the master, and another demon general is defeated. In the aftermath, Megumin joins Kazuma in bed, confesses her love, and he confesses back. Hooray! Oh, and Wolbach becomes part of Chomsky. Okay, so Kazuma was a bit of a background character in the last arc, but in this next arc, he really gets his chance to shine. A scenario where his one good stat, Lady Luck, is on full display. It's time for the Casino Kingdom arc. It starts with Kazuma getting a letter from Iris, saying that she's engaged to Prince Levy of the Casino Kingdom, Elroad, and asking him to provide an escort. Belsurg, the kingdom our story has been set in thus far, needs Cass to continue fighting the war with the Demon King. and Elroad has stopped supplying said cash. Hence, the plan to marry off Iris and renew the cash flow. Kazuma is furious at the thought of his quote-unquote little sister having a political marriage, and Darkness, foreseeing problems, promptly ties him up to prevent him doing anything rash. Aqua then unties him because she wants to go and gamble, and thus our heroes are off on their second prevent marriage to pay off debt quest. They join up with Iris and set out, escorting her to Elroad, which they quickly come to realize was unnecessary. Iris is silly overpowered and easily obliterates all monsters in their path. Then, upon arriving in Elroad, the so-called escorts all immediately cause trouble. A trio of noble fops have the misfortune of hitting on Aqua, Megumin, and Darkness, and immediately come to regret it. One takes Darkness to Sandbath and tries to outlast her, which goes poorly for him. He goes straight from the baths to the hospital. The second fop takes Megumin to a duction farm, which she promptly blows up for experience, and the fop has to pay for it. The last fop, who picked up Aqua, somehow manages to fare just as poorly as the other two. Aqua gets wasted on expensive wine on the fop's dime, and then goes to a department store to show off some of her party tricks. Her crowning trick is to make a grand piano disappear, which of course the last sad fop has to pay for. While the girls in the group are busy pushing the local bros into debt, Kazuma is doing the same thing with the local gamblers. He's just discovered that Elroad has a trading card game, heavily implied to be based off Yu-Gi-Oh! He joins a tournament and easily crushes the competition. After this first day of wrecking havoc in Elroad, Darkness is really concerned about the potential fallout Kazuma might cause when they go to meet royalty the next day. Her solution is to try and seduce Kazuma and slip him a sleeping potion. As with her past seduction attempts, this ends in failure, and Megumin swoops in to rescue Kazuma. Thus, despite Darkness's best efforts, the full party goes to visit Prince Levy the next day. As it turns out, he's an obnoxious brat who decides it would be a great idea to insult the entire party, and nearly gets exploded by Megumin for his efforts. Oh, and he calls off the engagement with Iris. After narrowly avoiding murdering the prince, the party finds out that the Prime Minister of Elroad is the real person in charge. So of course, Aqua immediately accuses him of being a demon. Somehow, these jaw-dropping acts of diplomacy don't get them immediately thrown out of the court, and Iris makes an appeal to the Prime Minister for money. His response is to lie through his teeth saying, "Oh, sorry, our country is far too poor." Iris switches to asking the prince, who, unsurprisingly, also says no. Iris then promises to harass Levy every day until he changes his mind, cementing this group as likely the worst set of diplomats Elroad has ever had to deal with. When they return for the second day of negotiations / harassment / begging, Levy has a proposal. He'll restore some percent of the original funding for each day that Iris can defeat an increasingly strong set of opponents, and if he continues to lose a game of pick which hand the coin is in to Kazuma. So, Iris defeats knights, a griffin, a golem, and so on, while Kazuma wins a game of pick the hand until all the original military aid was restored. Iris is not satisfied though. She wants more funding from Elroad. Cue a bunch of crackpot money-making schemes. Kazuma's first brilliant idea is to set off an explosion outside of the city, leave a note in the prince's bedchamber pretending the explosion was demons, and then make him scared enough to fork over more money. This goes poorly when Aqua manages to attract all the local undead in the desert after Megumin sets off the explosion, and the party gets caught by the local authorities and thrown in jail. Their second attempt is to go off dragon slaying to raise money, and this is slightly more successful. Iris manages to find and slay a dragon, but the reward money isn't enough. So, on to the third scheme. Win big in gambling. Now, this idea sounds even worse than the last two, or would if Kazuma's luck wasn't insane. Because it is, Kazuma manages to bankrupt all the state-run casinos to the point that Levy begs him to go home. Kazuma wins one last game of which hand is it in, and Levy finally agrees to the extra funding, much to the Prime Minister's dismay. As it turns out, Aqua was right. The Prime Minister was a shape-shifting demon, and a demon general at that. In the evening, following the successful completion of the negotiations/extortions, said demon general sneaks around, ties up a couple of party members, and gets executed immediately by Iris the moment he goes after her. Thus, everything ends well. Elroad starts paying the protection money Belserg requested. Oh, and Levy gets friend-zoned by Iris. So, you remember the last time Kazuma visited the Belserg Royal Palace? He was searching for an excuse to never leave. And given his large role in the successful extortion of Elroad, he finally has his excuse. He's enjoying his neat life there with his quote-unquote little sister, and gives no indication of leaving despite repeated requests. Eventually, Iris's retainers, in combination with the Royal Guard, set out to drive Kazuma out of the castle. And after an epic chase, Kazuma is finally captured. He's given a memory wipe potion and shipped back to Axel, while Iris gives him a tearful goodbye. I guess the author really wanted to have a good reason to push Iris out of the story, since after this point, she doesn't show up at all with the exception of one letter. However, this is not the end of the little sister pandering, but rather the start. We next get the Kameko arc. Megumin's little sister shows up after, as she puts it, her house went poof. Apparently, the Demon King was unhappy about one of the recent tourist attractions in the Crimson Mages village that let tourists peep on his daughter, and he sent out an army to deal with the village. Thus, Kameko will be in Axel for a bit. What follows can be summarized fairly simply. Kameko is overwhelmingly cute and cunning. She uses her talent to make sure she is spoiled to bits while visiting Axel, and in turn, the Adventurers Guild uses her to motivate all the adventurers, because you wouldn't want to disappoint Kameko, would you? So, in short order, all the guild jobs that no one wanted to do get taken care of, including banishing the last ghostly worshipper of the goddess of vengeance, slaying the Leisure Queen, and defeating a griffin, and a manticore, after which Megumin at long last earns the words that she's been waiting to hear. Big sis, you're awesome! Then, having thoroughly wrapped the entirety of Axel around her finger, Kameko heads back to the Crimson Magic Village. Oh, also, Kazuma and Megumin are now more than friends, but less than lovers, whatever that means. After a little sister arc for Kazuma, and a little sister arc for Megumin, the next arc is a daughter arc for Darkness. Yeah, so a little girl who calls Darkness Mama comes to visit. As it turns out, the girl, Sylphina, is actually Darkness's younger cousin. But this doesn't stop everyone from teasing the hell out of Darkness about it. And her humiliation doesn't end there. It's tax season. The tax collectors have come around to make sure all the adventurers pay their dues, and the collective response is to run away. Apparently, all the adventurers in town are tax evaders. Darkness tries to stop Kazuma from escaping by handcuffing herself to him, but Kazuma still escapes by getting himself thrown in jail before the tax collectors could catch him. When they're eventually released, no one thought to take off the cuffs connecting them, so Kazuma and Darkness end up going to bed together. Darkness tries to jump Kazuma for the umpteenth time, and Kazuma finally properly rejects Darkness. Back to the subject of this arc, Sylphina suddenly gets seriously ill, and Kazuma and Darkness are informed that a nail of a powerful devil is needed to save her. So after their awkward time in bed, Darkness and Kazuma are off on a quest to acquire the Devil Nail. Darkness happens to know a noble who is also a penguin suit devil, so they go over and politely ask him to hand over one of his nails. He says no, but Chris/Lady Eris shows up to help her devoted follower Darkness and goes full psycho goddess mode, stabbing the devil into submission. After both the Elroad incident and this one, it's starting to look like it's very dangerous to say no to Kazuma and crew when they have a request. Regardless though, they got the nail, Sylphina is saved, and this series' little sister arcs are all brought to a close. Remember Whiz, the arch-lit shopkeeper? Well, despite me not mentioning her in this video so far, she has actually been involved in most of the story arcs, just in minor roles. But no longer! This arc is hers, and I will skip over her contributions no more. This arc starts with Whiz getting a new addition to her shop, the penguin suit devil I mentioned in the last arc. Apparently, he continued to be attacked by Eris every night, so he's fled to seek Vanier's protection. His decision doesn't work too well for him though, because he soon runs into Aqua, who of course attacks him on sight. This does give Whiz, the usual target of such attacks, a reprieve, at least from Aqua. In Aqua's place, Whiz gets a stalker, who confesses he's followed her for many years, and prepares to attack her. Whiz runs away, not necessarily because she's scared though. Whiz comes to the conclusion that her stalker is a secret admirer, and is running because she's embarrassed. Anyways, the stalker, whose name is Duke, calls Whiz out for a duel. Whiz responds to the challenge, but manages to misunderstand the request for a duel as a confession of love, and flees again, teleporting away in embarrassment. After a few more misunderstandings, it eventually gets revealed that Duke actually wants to take over Whiz's role as a demon general, not to woo her. Feeling jilted, Whiz gives Duke the epic duel he wanted, and sends him to oblivion. Now, while I didn't want to steal Whiz's spotlight, a couple of other relevant things happened in this arc. Darkness tried to take Kazuma in bed, yet again, and Megumin once again came to his rescue. Apparently the author feels like this joke never gets old. Also, the Crimson Magic Village is looking for a new leader, and has started the Crimson Magic Trials, which brings us to our next story arc. The Crimson Magic Trials require 2 people, the person aiming to become the chief, and 1 assistant who can change between trials. Yun, aiming to be the next chief, initially asks Kazuma to be her partner, but Megumin, out of jealousy, insists that she go instead. This does not go well for either Yun or Megumin, and Megumin ends up blowing up the course for the chief trial out of frustration. Megumin is promptly banned from participating any further, so Yun calls the rest of the group to come over to the Crimson Magic Village and help out. Upon arriving, they find the inhabitants are as chuny as ever. There's stories of some weird monster roaming around called Mad Bomber Malgoninin. Surprisingly, these stories aren't about Megumin. Also, you remember that obnoxious armor from the festival arc, Aegis? He's back, and perverted as ever. And he's not the only one. Megumin's mom is back too, trying to get her underage daughter knocked up by Kazuma. This is how we know Megumin is not the Mad Bomber, incidentally, because she spent the night with Kazuma while the explosions were going off in the woods outside the village. Back to the chieftain trials. Yun has 3 left to complete. She picks Darkness as her first partner, and they strive to achieve the most chuny pose possible to satisfy the rest of the village. This is a tad humiliating, even for Darkness. For the next trial, Aqua is up as Yun's partner, and they are presented with a series of magic doors, 2 of which are randomly the correct ones. The trial is to keep going through the doors until both partners go through the correct ones. Given Aqua's terrible luck, this becomes something of an endurance trial, but eventually the 2 of them are able to complete it. 1 task remains, and now that Yun has partnered up with Megumin, Darkness, and Aqua, the only one left is Aegis. Yeah, Kazuma doesn't help at all here. The last task is to survive 1 night in the woods outside the Crimson Magic Village, which is inhabited by a load of high-level enemies. One would think Yun, wearing the legendary, albeit perverted armor, would have no trouble with this task. But as it turns out, wearing Aegis prevents spellcasting, so Yun ends up having to solo everything. She survives though, becomes the village chief, and there is much rejoicing throughout the village, with copious amounts of alcohol. A very drunk Kazuma and Megumin leave the celebrations and decide to take a stroll in the woods that Yun struggled to survive in the night before. Kazuma annoys some local wildlife, but amazingly manages not to die, and finds Mogoninin, which turns out to be a ninja robot with explosive magic. It was designed to kill harem protags, figures Kazuma fits the bill, and proceeds to try and murder him. Megumin explodes at first, though, once again asserting her dominance as the only true exploder, and Kazuma manages to go a story arc without needing any resurrections. We're now on to my favorite arc of this story, where Kazuma unleashes his full troll potential to defeat a demon general, the Evil Priestess arc. After getting back to Axel from the Crimson Magic Village, a beautiful priestess, Serena, approaches Kazuma and is all, "Oh, you're so handsome and heroic. Please let me join your party." Kazuma's response? No normal person would ever say that. You're clearly a servant of the Demon King. Serena sticks around though, and seems to be a model priestess, handing out blessings for free, cleansing the graveyard, healing the needy, and asking for no money in exchange. As such, her popularity quickly eclipses Aqua's, much to Aqua's distress. Then, Serena takes her second crack at Kazuma. She tells Kazuma a tragic story about how the Demon King isn't really evil, and asks Kazuma to please consider not killing him. As she's telling her tale of woe, Vanir and Whiz pass by and expose Serena. Turns out Kazuma's first instinct was right on the money. Serena is actually Cerestina, priestess of the goddess of revenge and puppetry Regina, and one of the demon generals. Oh, and of course the whole tragic story was made up. You see, because people stopped getting isekai'd over once Kazuma and Aqua showed up, the Demon King assumes that Kazuma must be the chosen one the gods decided would defeat him. As such, Serena was dispatched to deal with Kazuma. All these revelations lead to a bit of negotiating. Vanir gets Serena to buy a bunch of defective products in exchange for his silence, and Kazuma agrees to not reveal Serena if Serena tells the Demon King to not worry about Kazuma. Also, she casually lets them know that because she's the priestess of the goddess of revenge, any damage done to her is returned several times over, and killing her would straight up level the town. With all that out of the way, Serena feels ready to start her plans in earnest. She's an ability which lets her take control of anyone who feels indebted to her, with the only escape being repaying the debt. And she uses that ability to start taking over Axel. While Kazuma has agreed not to reveal Serena's identity, that doesn't mean he's going to stand by idly either. So he goes and dropkicks her in the head, and then starts his grand Serena harassment campaign. This campaign ranges from starting rumors that Serena is secretly a man, to sharpshooting her coffee so it spills over her lap, to convincing a man that Serena rejected that clearly she's just a tsundere, and he should keep on pursuing her. After driving Serena up a wall with his antics, she finally manages to strike back at Kazuma by tricking him into feeling indebted to her, making him her puppet and follower of Lady Regina. Unfortunately for Serena, this marks not the end of Kazuma's harassment campaign, but merely a new stage. You see, as part of being Serena's loyal puppet, he refuses to do anything major for her that could repay his debt, lest his puppetification be undone, and takes compensation for all the more minor acts of service he does, such as writing highly erotic fiction about Serena. After some prolonged harassment by her puppet, Serena tries to release Kazuma, but being the loyal puppet that he is, he resists being set free. At this point, she goes to Megumin, Darkness, and Aqua to return Kazuma. With the power of Megumin's panties and an anti-puppet potion from Vanir, Kazuma is set free. Kazuma makes Serena drink a potion from Vanir, which sets both their levels back to 1, and Serena is arrested and shipped back off to the capital for punishment. Another demon general defeated. All that's left now is defeating the Demon King. With another demon general defeated, Aqua really starts chomping at the bit to go forth and defeat the Demon King. But Kazuma is less keen, which makes sense now that he's back to level 1. Aqua decides to force the issue and runs off to defeat the Demon King on her own, leaving a "please come find me" note for the rest of the party. Then Kazuma finally discovers the type of cheat strats that your average isekai protagonist would get at the start of the story. After he had his level reset to 1, he noticed that he kept all his skills, which gives him an idea. Since it's easier to gain levels at lower levels, and Whiz has a lich ability which drains levels, he can just gain a bunch of skill points at low levels, reset his level to level 1, rinse and repeat. Also, to speed up this process even more, he convinces Whiz and Vanir to take him to the deepest dungeon in the continent and power level him. After thoroughly exploiting this one simple trick, Kazuma, Megumin, and Darkness set out to catch up with Aqua. Oh, also, while Kazuma was busy cheat training, Union and magic sword guy Mitsugiri join up with Aqua. Between these two groups, we have our band of heroes that will defeat the Demon King. Kazuma and Ko rush to catch up with Aqua's group, but just barely miss her, as she uses her god powers to slip her group through the barrier around the Demon King's castle. Unable to take this subtle approach, Kazuma gives Megumin the best present she could ever imagine, a huge pile of MP restoring manatite crystals. She is overcome with joy, and proceeds to have an explosion festival, destroying the barrier, a good chunk of the Demon King's army, and a couple of opponents who were probably at demigod tier power levels, but couldn't handle the brokenness of near infinite mana explosion spam. Following the festival's finale, Kazuma and Ko are reunited with Aqua's group in the Demon King's castle, minus Aqua, who has vanished. While searching, Kazuma finds a big do not touch button, touches it, and of course is taken straight to Aqua. After some trickery and trolling of demon guards by Kazuma, he manages to steal some armor for a disguise and reunite with everyone else in the Great Hall of the Demon King's castle, where the party is confronting the captain of the Royal Guard. Kazuma backstabs the captain, and we get an emotional reunion of the whole team. Then, they're off to the throne room to defeat the Demon King. At the start of this final fight, Kazuma dies. What did you expect? But of course Aqua revives him, and just in time too. Megumin was about to suicide bomb everyone. Feeling cocky after his resurrection, Kazuma decides to 1v1 the Demon King, and teleports them to the bottom of the dungeon he was power leveling in earlier. As it turns out though, despite all the skills Kazuma has gained, he's still really not a match for the Demon King. And what we get is less of an epic duel, and more of a game of cat and mouse. After a few clashes and a whole lot of running away, Kazuma takes his final stand, and uses Explosion, which he learnt from Megumin. This collapses the dungeon, defeating the Demon King, but also killing Kazuma. Worry not, as Kazuma is back to meet with Eris, and for his great services, he is offered the same choices that Aqua once offered him right at the beginning of the story. Kazuma asks if he can take a goddess as his cheat, much to Aqua's joy, and then just to troll her, he chooses to take Eris with him instead. Aqua comes back down from heaven anyways, and as it turns out, Kazuma planned taking her back with him all along. Apparently, you can register heaven as one of your teleport locations. Thus, we come to the happily ever after in the story. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you all for listening. Cheers!